Sorry that got interrupted. This is part 2. Although recovery began by 1786, the war's effects proved hard to erase. Before the war broke out, per capita income in the rebel colonies had averaged roughly $2,130. In 1790, the years after the war ended, per capita income averaged $1,220. This drop of more than 40% nearly equaled the Americans' losses in the early years of the Great Depression. By 1805, average per capita income had rebounded to $1,830, but the recovery bypassed much of the countryside, especially in the lower South. The near total cessation of foreign commerce during the war stimulated domestic manufacturing, and the post-war period witnessed the stirrings of American industrial development. The first American textile mill began production in Pawtucket, Rhode Island in 1793. The country's export trade shifted from Europe and toward the West Indies, continuing a trend that began before the war. Foodstuffs shipped to the French and Dutch Caribbean colonies became America's single export, replacing tobacco. South Carolina resumed importing slaves on the large scale, as planters sought to replace workers who fled during the war. Yet, without British subsidies, American indigo could not compete with that produced in the Caribbean, and even rice planters struggled to find new markets. From Crisis to the Constitution, 7-2. Congress could not establish a uniform commercial policy to ensure compliance with the treaties it signed. Lacking the power to convey or collect taxes, it could not raise revenues needed to run the government. By the mid-1780s, Americans involved in overseas trades, Western land speculation, foreign affairs, and finance had become acutely aware of the inadequacies of the Articles of Confederation. 7-2A, the Annapolis Convention. Recognizing the Confederation Congress's inability to deal with commercial matters, representatives of Virginia and Maryland met at George Washington's Mount Vernon plantation in March of 1785 to negotiate an agreement about trade on the Potomac River. The meeting prompted an invitation to other states to discuss trade policy more broadly at a convention in Annapolis. Although 9 states named representatives to the gathering in September 1786, only 5 delegations attended, too few to have any significant impact. Those present issued a call for another convention to be held in Philadelphia 9 months later, to devise such further provisions as shall appear necessary to render the Constitution of the federal government adequate to the exigencies of the Union. At first, few other states responded, but the nation's economic problems also caused taxation woes. The states had run up huge debts to finance the war, issuing securities to pay soldiers, purchase supplies, and underwrite loans. During the hard times of the early 1780s, many veterans and other creditors sold those securities to speculators for pennies on the dollar. In 1785, Congress requisitioned still more taxes from the state to pay off foreign and domestic holders of national war bonds. When states tried to comply, they succeeded primarily in arousing popular protest. The most dramatic response came in Massachusetts, which levied heavy taxes to pay the securities at full price in specie before the end of the decade. Farmers faced with selling their land to pay the new taxes responded furiously. The actions of men from the state's western counties, many of them veterans from leading families, convinced doubters that reform was needed. 7-2B, Shays' Rebellion. Daniel Shays, a former officer in the Continental Army, assumed nominal leadership of the disgruntled Westerners. On January 25, 1787, he led about 1,500 troops in an assault on the Federal Armory at Springfield. The militiamen mustered to defend the armory fired on their former comrades, who suffered 24 casualties. Some, including Shays, fled the state. 2 were hung or hanged. Most paid fines and took oaths of allegiance to Massachusetts. The state legislature soon reduced the burden on landowners, easing tax collections and enacting new import duties instead. Reprinted in newspapers throughout the United States, the words of the Shay sites reverberated around the new nation, calling Massachusetts tyrannical and styling themselves regulators. They had linked their rebellion with the struggle for American independence, as political insurgents in the United States would do for decades more to come. The end.